Hello, one and all. I'm happy to introduce myself to this series of lectures on the plays of Shakespeare. My name is David Gamble. I'm a retired teacher of some 50 years in the school systems of Ontario, Canada. One of my greatest pleasures in the profession was the teaching of Shakespeare and the mounting of those plays, some few plays, on stage with students. My target audiences are four. First, the senior high school student who is grappling with the early modern language and has tests and assignments coming up. Second, the early college students who might have a little more rigorous time presenting more serious theses, ideas, more stringent tests, getting into theory, and more complex things. I hope they can give some insight to them. Third, beginning teachers. I do remember, it was some time ago, I do remember how the first few years are challenging, and time saving is key to presenting the best you can be to your students as you perform the plays for them in the class. So if I can help the beginning teacher, that's close to my heart. Fourth, the playgoers, the general playgoer who enjoy them, enjoy the Shakespeare. They go to Stratford or wherever they go in town and sit and often have questions and what was that about? And I didn't quite get that. And perhaps these lectures can give them an immediate insight and enhance the price of their tickets, which are not cheap these days. So those four. So everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. So I'm going to be talking about the moral order of nature, otherwise known as the chain of being. It's a metaphysical abstract. The moral order provides a platform on which the entire structure, if you like, the ideational structure of many of the plays rest, particularly the tragedies in the tragic form, as the metaphysical construction of the universe and the tragic form from the classical combine. And I hope I can make that clear as we go along. So, although the model may be medieval, ideas do not pass overnight, but devolve and evolve slowly and stubbornly as the old passes away and the new take hold and become the dominant culture. Just as early 17th century was moving into the rationalist and scientific enlightenment, with writings given to reason such as Novum Organum by Francis Bacon, their view of the world was still metaphysical and traditional. This grounding or motif shows up in more than one work. In fact, John Milton established it very clearly in Paradise Lost, and that's a little bit later. It's about 1660, and Shakespeare stops writing about 1611, 1612. The structure, the metaphysical background is still there. Also, to name a few, Macbeth, Hamlet, the Tempest, King Lear can be appreciated through this lens. Is merely a lens to which but it's a very consistent one, and it's quite a profound one. Nature in Shakespeare's times was just beginning to be examined scientifically by the methods the modern world has taken for granted. In these times, science was called natural philosophy, the love of wisdom about nature. But it took many years to supplant the medieval view in which Shakespeare had inherited, even though he is Renaissance, from times past. And the tragedies are immersed in the popular imagination through the tragic form of the Elizabethans. We're going to put those two together. So nature was a moral order. It was pyramidal. It envisioned God at the very top, at the apex, and all creation in order descended from God. God, the most perfect, I should put my hand in here, God, the most perfect at the top, singular, although Trinity, if you will, to more many and varied, but ordered. It's a caste system of being. So the degrees of perfection, God is most perfect. The angels are next. And then you have man, and then you have the animals, and then you have the plants, and then you have minerals, and then that's pretty well the bottom line. Um, so when Lucifer sinned through the sin of pride, and that's very, very important because it's very much part of the tragic mode, which we will include later, the Lucifer, the bearer of light, is what it means, who was the prime angel, right? It's the top general that creates the coup, right? It's not the poor little peasant from the bottom. Maybe later. Um, so the top angel, Lucifer, decides I can run this show. He can. I can. I'm taking over. So Paradise Lost, he tries to, fails, and he falls into the deepest, furthest abyss away from God, the least perfect being in the metaphysical universe. So you have then the pyramid reversed. It becomes diamond shaped. And I'm going to hold something up for you that I think will illustrate. Can you see this? So you have at the top God, angels, and they have a hierarchy of their own. Man with its hierarchy, animals, plants. I didn't put minerals in, but you could. When Satan falls, he falls the furthest down to the bottom. He's the furthest, least perfect, most evil, darkest, and then you ascend to less imperfect, less sinful, and upwards. All right. This was Margaret Thatcher might say, there is no alternative. This is the metaphysical universe, chain of being, moral order, and it was a moral order. God is good, Satan is bad. There's a moral order. So, how does this affect the major characters in the play? Where does the tragic mode come into service here? So, furthermore, every stratum, every caste level has its own order. It must see it reflects God's divine order, so it's got to have it too. Very simply, we'll show you this again. I think we can do this. So when we're talking about the feudal order, you're talking, of course, the monarch is at the top, the king. And the king, for years, was crowned by the Archbishop of Canterbury. The bad guy Napoleon took the crown from the church prelate and put it on his own head. Whoa, secularism, that's another story. So you have here the monarch, singular, usually male primogeniture. Apparently, Queen Elizabeth abolished that. It is now just simply the firstborn. The royal family, all the royals, grand duchesses, and what have you. And then you have the upper nobility, lower nobility, the gentry, the common man, the freedman, etc., and the feudal times down to the serf, right? The masses. And that is a sacred order. And remember, it's a sacred order because the king is anointed by the highest prelate in the land. God wants it this way, and it reflects the moral order of the universe, the total one, and this is the more specific one that must be a copy. We can talk also about the church, right? St. Peter, now going back, pre-Reformation, Pope, St. Peter's throne, cardinals, archbishop, bishop, priest, and then all the lay people, the laic, it's called, or layman. All right. And again, it's fixed. So this really hangs on and has hung on. We still have it. You see this hierarchy of in society where the deserving must, right? We might call it meritocracy, but there's a kind of a moral order to that. We haven't left too much behind. So nature's beginning to be examined scientifically in Shakespeare's time. You've got Tycho and you've got Galileo, and things are, and the church is really resisting this, right? So nature was a moral order, pyramidal, envisioning God at the top and all creation organized in descending degrees of perfection, with a closer or higher being close to God and more superior morally than the more distant, the less perfect. It was pyramidal, God at the apex, going down, and then reverse with Lucifer. So, in the animal stratum, just for example, there is also a hierarchy. Why do kings always use the lion? The Lion King. Why do the rose, right, is often used symbolically as the perfect, as Dante Alighieri talks about the multifoliate rose is the highest. The dandelion doesn't do so well, the humblest. So the human sphere has two prevalent hierarchies: the church and state, established by the divine order, and the class strata are divinely ordained. Everything is divinely ordained. So that we are, if there weren't such a thing, you think of the opposite, what chaos we would have. Such disorder. Of course, with the Bolshevik Revolution, the elites were terrified, right, that the masses were going to rise up and assume the same dignity that they thought was rightfully theirs. So that's when the conflicts of the modern age comes in. So the to abrogate such a thing, then, was not just a crime in law in the secular order, but rather a sacrilege. The anointed monarch was protected by God, has been chosen by God, and this is the way it was. So that any abolition of that monarch was a sacrilege and an offense to God. So Hamlet and Macbeth come to mind immediately, wherein two kings are hideously murdered, and the spilling of blood. The Pope had similar protection, although the infallibility of the Pope didn't come formally until 1870, but it was by custom assumed the Pope had veto power or positive say. So those top men, however, couldn't do just what they felt like doing. Those top men had to perform the role that God wanted, and that is the maintenance of that order. So that in Lear, when Lear decides, you're going to treat me as the king, but I'm giving up the kingship. Wait a minute. You were anointed to the kingship to perform the role that God put you in. You can't just walk away with your scepter and crown, etc., leave it behind and say, oh, but I am king. It becomes ego, not duty to the above. The same with the Pope. So everybody had to play his I'm going to say, or her role, but her is also the women did not have those choices. Elizabeth I is an anomaly because there were no more men, right? Victoria, right? Her uncles had lots of kids, but not one of them was legitimate. Blessed by marriage. We'll run into that in Lear as well, what adultery does. So the threat of liberalizing of the merchant class and the commoners is pretty serious stuff in the French Revolution. That's the destruction of the order, particularly the Jacobins. And look what chaos is released. What is it? 30,000 heads rolls down the Place de Nation. Bloodshed, chaos, upset. And who comes back? Napoleon. Now he's not king, but he is crowned, and he crowns himself. Interesting, historically, symbolically. So the Reign of Terror was a good example, right? And it terrified the monarchs in Europe. You had the Revolutionary Wars. However, I digress. Napoleon, a little bit, Napoleon dismissed that idea of the divine right of kings. I take it because I, the individual, can have it. But the divine right of kings was fixed certainly during Shakespeare's time. So when Macduff kills Duncan, he condemns his eternal soul, right? He's uh, what he's done is he's erased that line, that level between God's grace coming down and oops, it gets stopped. The divinely ordained king is not there. There is a blockage. And God knows what can come up from now that there is nothing, God's grace is not holding it down. What can come up and take over? And what takes over are the hideousness of Macbeth, the killing of Banquo, the wandering of ghosts, all hell breaks loose. What is normal and natural is thrown aside. Um, so his attempt to rise, if we talk about Macbeth, is, let's go back to the seven deadly sins, the cardinal sin, the number one sin, and this is true in the Garden of Eden. This is old stuff. Was the sin of pride. In classical terms, in classical tragedy, it was called hubris, and I'll probably use the terms interchangeably. So the sin of pride will destroy, because it is the cardinal sin, will destroy that order. In Macbeth, and also in the Tempest, which is not a tragedy, it's a comedy. If you compare the two, happy ending, bad or unhappy ending, or catastrophic ending, what Prospero wanted to do was to have the power of gods and magic. You're not supposed to do that. That's not your place. He gets sent to an island, right? Off he goes, etc. And he has to, at the end, renounce and go back to his humanness, to his humanity, and restore order as it should be. But because he acts with forgiveness, this is a longer analysis of the Tempest, which I would like to do sometime. Longer analysis of the Tempest, which says once you restore your order with humility in the light of God's grace, you are forgiven. Prayer, humility, compassion, for mercy forgives all faults, Prospero says. So in Lear, what he does, he wants to actually destroy the whole kingdom. I'm going to give this little bit to you, and a little bit to you, and a little bit to you. What happened to Britain? It doesn't exist anymore. Wow, pretty simple. Because I am me, he says. Hubris in the classical terms, or pride in the Christian terms, right? Medieval Christian. So Lear abdicates the position while expecting to retain the status. You can't do that. So he loses his court totally, and nothing will protect him from those forces that will come from below. And where he is, he's out on the heath, straggling around in rags, where he meets Tom of Bedlam, and a little more on Tom later. So Hamlet's crisis is the result of the murder of his father, the old Hamlet, the ordained king by a brother Claudius. It's as Cain's, and I quote, as the primal elder's curse, brother killing brother, on the innocent Abel. In these dramas, it is not merely the sinner that must suffer, but the entire state, because they are at the pinnacle, and things go down, right? They don't go up. This is not a democratic system by any means. So you get hints of it too, that the natural order has been destroyed, because then nature starts to reflect the chaos, which you get dark nights in Macbeth, right? And you sleepwalking and dreams and apparitions and all kinds of weird stuff leaking up from the bottom. In Macbeth also, when a hawk was slain by a mousing owl, hawks kill owls. This time, the mousing owl kills the hawk. That's a reversal of nature. And there's the sort of harbinger of doom, that nature is upset and reversed. So each hierarchy follows a general pyramidal model, so that when the corruption at the top affects the system, creates a vacuum, the lower orders can rise. But I think I've said that. So, therefore, Respect and adherence to the grand order is necessary if God's plan is to establish order and harmony rightfully. God has that plan. There is purpose to it. As mortals living within it, we are accommodated. Now, I want to stress that word accommodated and accommodation. As mortals living within it, we are accommodated by this. It is our accommodation to have order. And we have order by preserving, respecting, adhering to, honoring God's law, the moral order of the universe. And when we don't have that accommodation anymore. We are not accommodated by structure. Chaos, in the middle of a war, chaos, and we have a few examples around in history and in our contemporary world, absolute chaos and horror. So, God is giving us virtue and harmony. And the preservation of his design is our reward, where we can have love, stability, and harmony. Without it, the good suffer, and you have chaos. It's a very interesting passage by Rosencrantz in Hamlet, and he basically says it. He says the cess or the cease of majesty. It's when Claudius thinks he's going to be killed that he's the king, but actually he's the false king. So there's an irony there, which we don't have to go into, but I think it's apparent. The cess or cease of majesty dies not alone. The king doesn't die alone, but like a gulf, a big empty space, doth draw what's near it with it. Everything gets sucked into that hole. Or it is a massy wheel fixed on the summit. That's the king. Remember the sun sign for Louis? Fixed on the summit of the highest mount, to whose huge spokes are mortised and adjoined with guy wires like a tent. 10,000 lesser things, all of us, all our structures, all our worldly possessions, our public buildings, our infrastructures. 10,000 lesser things are mortised and adjoined, which when it falls, each small annexment, petty consequence, attends the boisterous ruin. Never alone did the king sigh, but with a general groan. Things come down. The king sighs, and the whole country is, oh, what's that about? Right. And that's Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 3, line 15 to 23. So what was left when the divine order of nature descended into chaos? King Lear gives the working model. Humans become bereft of grace. What would humanity become if the ordained nature is in shambles? Animal. The human is gone. We miss that level. We go next to the animal. So there we have come in the symbol of the unaccommodated man, the man without the order provided. The unaccommodated man, exiled from God's natural order. We have Tom a Bedlam. Now, it's interesting that the word a bedlam. Bedlam. What is bedlam? I mean, it's chaos. It's a mess. It's corruption. It's ruination. It's bedlam, right? The kids are screaming in the other room, and there's bedlam in there. But it comes from the word Bethlehem. In Elizabethan times, there was a hospital for the insane, and it was called Bethlehem. It got shortened as the British will, like Worcester and all those things. We'll shorten it to Bedlam, and the word became meaning chaos and ruin. So, Tom a Bedlam. Can you imagine an insane asylum in Elizabethan times? It would be staggering. So, that's his metaphor for a being, a human exiled from God's natural order. And so the king, Lear, says, or the ex-king, or the self-imposed kingly proud thing, thou, Tom of Bedlam, who shows up in rags, probably you would put him naked on stage if you could, maybe with a little diaper, with nothing against this raging storm on this dark heath at night. That's man. That's oh, existentially, that's the human individual. He says, thou'rt the thing itself. Unaccommodated man is no more but such a poor forked animal as thou art. Lear's original sin has collapsed the order, and each one of us, mortis and enjoined, must suffer the chaos that follows. So, Tom and Lear, actually, he wanders the heath in rags and ruin. The two daughters have embraced evil, and they're fighting over one man, and they're fighting over the spoils to take it all. Uh, the honest men are wandering in disguise, where you have Tom as an undisguised disguise, as naked, and the Duke of Kent, who was his loyal nobleman, who is exiled because he spoke the truth. He's exiled now and appears as a common man. He's just a man telling the truth. It's so poetic. Um, so, and the elements are raging as they orchestrate this pathetic fallacy and this cacophony of sounds and winds and violent elements that are clashing with each other. They have rags on their backs. This icon Tom is the human animal supported by nothing at all, for his order has been corrupted. The ramifications are clear. The nature of the human animal without divine grace sinks to a lower order, the animal as well represented by Edmund. Now let's go to the other story. There's a story of Lear giving away his kingdom and his kingship, and chaos following, and the daughters going after each other, and the same man, and all those animal lusts for power and greed, etc. The seven deadly sins are there. Um, but also in the other story, where we have the Duke of Gloucester, who has two sons, one legitimate, one illegitimate. But the thing is, with the illegitimate son Edmund, who is the bad guy, Gloucester is still proud of what a sport there was in his making. He's still proud of the act of adultery. Well, it's the sin of pride morphed into lust, another sin. So Edmund is metaphorically the recipient of that sin, and he is the bad guy. It's a little, shall we say, not allegorical, but it's a little simplified. Um, so he's the product of carnal lust, showing all the signs of debasement of his moral being, and he tries to trick the legitimate brother out of his honest legacy that would come. It's primogeniture, and he's the legitimate son, and can only inherit the title, not the bastard son. So he's trying to cheat the brother, and so he lies and deceives and plays awful tricks on his father, etc. Right. So, Gloucester's adultery, the sin of lust, is the release of the animal nature which can subvert us all. The only salvation is to return to God's plan through obeying his will. Such is the subplot of Gloucester and his two sons. Will it get back to order? So, in terms of Shakespeare's language, when that line is cut off for the grace to come down, anytime Lear, in his angry period, or in his disinherited period, because the daughters throw him out, they're not interested in him anymore. They got what they wanted, and they want more from each other. So he calls God, it's all animal and organic imagery. It is nothing from the heavens. So Goneril is a child of spleen, right? That's laughter and anger in your body. To be cursed with wrinkles, like a few of these wrinkles in her brow of youth. I want you wrinkled and old and wizened looking when you're 29. Um, Cordelia affords redemption. She tells the truth, and she is banished. All the ones who tell the truth are banished. Cordelia is gone. Of course, the fool goes with Lear. Edgar must go, right? And the Duke of Kent, wandering around just as a commoner, is not the Duke of Kent anymore because the structure has been subverted. Therefore, the two plots make a nice pair about this moral order being maintained as something sacred. And the ultimate product is Tom of Bedlam, the icon. He's sort of the existential icon of man released to nature with no accommodation, the unaccommodated man. So moral order then will be reestablished. I'm sure you probably know Lear, will be reestablished when Albany, who is one of the husbands, reasserts the moral order and realizes how awful the two women were, his wife and Regan, and reestablish some kind of order in the land and try to rebuild God's grace coming down again. However, there is no nice, neat binary code of order and chaos, divine and animal. The real issue of nature is to contemplate that which is in between human nature. We're tugged both ways, right? Our sins will take us down, cut off God's grace. Our virtue will elevate as Prospero is re-elevated back to his rightful position back home. Clearly, that is where the author takes us in a decline from the ordered world of Lear's High Court, complete with rightful authority at the beginning, to madness on the heath, very far from that fortress of ordained kingship. So in many plays, when this author throws the human condition into ambiguity, he throws us out of the ordered world into a heath, a witch's cave, right, very unnatural, or a forest in darkness, which could be Midsummer Night's Dream, a fairyland. I'm thinking of Cymbeline as well. When the order is destroyed, you often go to some liminal space where sort of anything can happen. Right, Macbeth goes to seek witches. He goes out of the castle, out of the hierarchical court. Um, Hamlet discovers his father outside in a liminal space. Cymbeline goes to Wales. It's so that you have this sort of sidestepping in order to reorganize things and bring them back in. Here, human nature is stripped bare of its trappings and must face itself, as Cymbeline does, and the others in Wales, the elements of the music, as Ariel scolds the harpy in the Tempest, as a harpy in the Tempest. To an island, right. I left that out. In the Tempest, they go to an island out of that in order to restructure and reinvite themselves back in. So the bard gives this unaccommodated man, stripped bare without clothing, without sustenance, without shelter, without convenience, facing nature in the raw. So we ask, so what is a human being? Right? What is a man or woman? What is a person? Humanity, the lesson is, must be accommodated by God's order, its moral order. So, in general, the carnage at the end of Lear, Hamlet, and Macbeth are consequences of the dismissal of the accommodation of the metaphysical order and must be rebuilt by one with credentials that could assume ascendancy. As Fortinbras pops up, Deus Ex Machina, at the very end. He's the only one with that royal category who can do it. So Shakespeare just better drag this guy in. And of course, he's a good guy now, so all is moral and all is right. And he's got the credentials and the right royal blood to reestablish Denmark. So, in general, the carnage at the end of Lear, Hamlet, and Macbeth are consequences of the dismissal of the accommodation of the metaphysical order. They have to be rebuilt. You've got Albany, Fortinbras, and Malcolm in Macbeth. There must be a noble rescue, as such with Albany, who has resisted the corruption from Goneril. In fact, in an earlier version, Edgar reestablished the order, but Edgar, it's been changed in the folio, and so that Edgar's not high enough. Albany is higher. It's necessary. So we have then the reestablishment. Prospero is redeemed by mercy. How do you get out of all this mess? The Tempest is instructive. So, however, the Tempest is a comedy and avoids catastrophe. Why? Order is reestablished with love and forgiveness. Relieved of his pride, Prospero invokes mercy, forgiveness, and prayer as the antidote to chaos, as his humility rebuilds order that he has forsaken. He must forsake that pride and give up on his magic. Mercy and forgiveness are the balm and curative. And he says, and so from the Tempest, he says at the very end in the epilogue, now I want spirits to enforce, this is prayer, art to enchant, and my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults, as you from crimes would pardon be, that your indulgence set me free. And you'll notice it's really interesting. He says, prayer assaults mercy itself, right? So if you pray, if you forgive, mercy isn't necessary anymore. There's something higher. And prayer gets you to forgiveness. That's bigger than just giving. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll give you mercy. I'm still in the ascendant, but I don't. If I forgive you. You're not wrong. You have. I don't see you as wronging me anymore. We're back to equal. That is where prayer will get you, and that's a higher form, closer to God than even mercy, charity. So the order must be restored. That may be as true today as then, as Dame Thatcher said, there is no alternative. Well, thank you all for joining the lecture. I hope you continue to enjoy the following lectures on the literature that I've developed and will continue to develop. I trust they will serve your understanding as theatergoers, teachers, and students. If you enjoyed the presentation, please hit the like and check out other installments in the series and subscribe if you can. Thank you.